He needed a nanny for his kids, but never expected to find the love he'd been hiding from. Hello, let's hear another incredible story. Don't forget to like and subscribe to our channel. I love narrating stories for you, so get ready. Let's start. The gravel driveway crunched beneath Talia Brooks' worn sneakers as she approached the imposing colonial mansion. Spanish moss draped the ancient oaks like wedding veils, and the late afternoon Charleston sun cast long shadows across manicured lawns that seemed to stretch endlessly. She clutched her single suitcase tighter, her dark eyes taking in the grandeur that would be her new temporary home. At 33, Talia had learned that beautiful facades often hid the deepest pain. This house, with its pristine white columns and perfectly trimmed hedges, felt like a mausoleum, too quiet, too perfect, too much like a place where laughter had died. She rang the doorbell, its melodic chime echoing through what she imagined were empty hallways. Footsteps approached, measured and deliberate. The door opened to reveal a man who looked like he'd been carved from exhaustion. Declan Rhodes stood before her, his dark hair disheveled despite obvious attempts to tame it, his blue eyes carrying the weight of someone who'd seen too much loss. He was handsome in that broken way that made women want to fix things, but Talia had learned the hard way that broken people could only heal themselves. Ms. Brooks. His voice was deeper than she'd expected from their brief phone conversation, tinged with a southern accent he'd probably tried to suppress in business meetings. "That's me." She extended her hand, noting how his calloused fingers spoke of a man who worked with his hands despite the expensive watch adorning his wrist. "Thank you for this opportunity, Mr. Rhodes." "Declan, please." He stepped aside, allowing her into a foyer that could have housed her entire previous apartment. "The children are, well, they're being children somewhere upstairs. Madison is 8 and Connor is 5. They're good kids, just—" He trailed off, running a hand through his hair. "Just grieving." Talia finished gently, recognizing the look in his eyes, the same one she saw in her mirror every morning. Something flickered across his face. Surprise, maybe, or recognition. "Yes, exactly." He cleared his throat. The moment of vulnerability quickly shuttered. "Let me show you to your room. We can discuss schedules and expectations over dinner." As they climbed the curved staircase, Talia noticed the family photos lining the walls. A beautiful woman with kind eyes smiled from frame after frame, holding babies, laughing at birthday parties, dancing at what looked like their wedding. Declan's wife had been radiant, the kind of woman who probably lit up every room she entered. "That's Elena," Declan said, catching her gaze. "She died 18 months ago, cancer. I'm sorry for your loss." The words felt inadequate, but they were all she had. Thank you." He paused at a door near the end of the hallway. "This is your room. It has its own bathroom and a small sitting area. The children's rooms are just down the hall. Madison in the yellow room, Connor in the blue." Talia's room was larger than most people's master bedrooms, decorated in soft greys and whites, with windows overlooking the garden. It was beautiful and impersonal, like a high-end hotel room. "Dinner is at 6, Declan continued, his tone strictly business now. "The children eat together. It's one of the few routines we've managed to maintain. Breakfast is usually casual, whatever they want within reason. Madison is responsible for helping Connor with small tasks, and Connor is working on using his words instead of tantrums." "What about you?" Talia asked, setting her suitcase on the pristine white bedspread. "What about me? Do you eat with them?" Another flicker of something crossed his features. "I try to be home by bedtime. My work often requires—" "I wasn't judging," Talia interrupted softly. "I was just wondering if you needed someone to make sure there was a plate set aside for you too." For a moment, Declan Rhodes looked like he might cry. Instead, he straightened his shoulders and checked his expensive watch. "I'll let you get settled. The kitchen is downstairs, first door on your left past the living room. Maria, our housekeeper, left everything you might need." After he left, Talia sat on the edge of the bed and finally allowed herself to truly look around. Through the windows, She could see a swing set in the backyard, its seats swaying gently in the evening breeze. Empty, like everything else in this house seemed to be. She unpacked her few belongings, hanging her simple dresses next to the spacious closet that could have held 10 times her wardrobe. In the drawer of the nightstand, she placed her most precious possession, a small blue baby shoe, worn soft from years of handling. Her fingers traced its tiny laces before she closed the drawer firmly. At exactly 6 o'clock, she made her way downstairs, following the sound of voices to a dining room that could have seated 20, but held only a small table near the windows. 2 children sat across from each other, picking at plates of what looked like grilled cheese and tomato soup. Madison Rhodes was a miniature version of her mother, with Eleanor's warm brown eyes and Declan's stubborn chin. Her dark hair was pulled back in a ponytail that had seen better days, and she regarded Talia with the serious expression of a child who'd been forced to grow up too quickly. Connor was all energy, barely contained in a small body. His father's blue eyes bright with curiosity as he studied the new arrival. His blonde hair stuck up in several directions, and there was what appeared to be soup on his shirt. "And you must be Madison and Connor," Talia said, taking the empty seat that had obviously been set for her. "I'm Talia. I'm going to be staying here for a while to help take care of you." "Are you going to leave like the others?" Madison asked bluntly, her fork suspended halfway to her mouth. "Madison," came Declan's voice from the doorway. He'd changed from his work clothes into jeans and a button-down shirt, looking more human, but no less tired. That's not polite." "It's okay," Talia said, meeting Madison's challenging gaze. "That's a fair question. I'm planning to stay as long as you need me, and as long as your dad wants me here. But I understand why you'd wonder. It's hard when people leave." Something in Madison's expression softened slightly. Connor, meanwhile, had been studying Talia with the intensity only children possessed. "You're really pretty," he announced. "Doom, like Mama was." The silence that followed was deafening. Declan's jaw tightened, and Madison's eyes filled with tears she was clearly fighting not to shed. "Thank you, Connor," Talia said gently. "Your mama was very beautiful. I saw her pictures upstairs." "Daddy took them all down from our rooms," Connor continued, oblivious to the tension he was creating. "He said it made him too sad." "Connor, eat your soup," Declan said sharply, then seemed to catch himself. "Please." Talia watched the interplay, recognizing the signs of a family drowning in unprocessed grief. The children were clearly starving for any mention of their mother, while Declan was doing everything he could to avoid those very conversations. After dinner and bedtime routines, Talia found herself walking past Declan's office. The door was ajar, and she could see him hunched over architectural drawings, a glass of whiskey at his elbow. "They're good kids," she said softly through the crack. "They are." His voice was rough. "Thank you for dinner. I know it's not easy, jumping into the middle of all this." "We're all just figuring it out as we go," Talia replied. "Good night, Declan." As she closed her bedroom door, Talia caught her reflection in the window. For the first time in months, she looked like she had a purpose again. It scared her almost as much as it gave her hope. The morning sun filtered through Talia's bedroom curtains, waking her to the sound of small feet running down the hallway. She checked her phone, 6:47 a.m. At home, she'd always been an early riser, but grief had turned her into someone who stayed in bed until the last possible moment. Here, though, she felt pulled toward the day. After dressing in jeans and a soft yellow sweater, she made her way downstairs to find Connor sitting at the kitchen island in his pajamas, attempting to pour cereal into a bowl with questionable success. Half the Cheerios had missed their target. "Good morning, Connor," she said, moving to help him. "You're up early." "Daddy left already," he said matter-of-factly. "He always leaves before we wake up. Madison's still sleeping, but I got hungry." Talia felt her heart squeeze. "How about I help you with that cereal? And then we can make something special for Madison when she wakes up." "Like what?" "Do you know what your mama used to make for breakfast?" Connor's face lit up like a Christmas tree. "Pancakes with faces on them. She made Mickey Mouse and princess ones and sometimes dinosaurs." Dinosaur pancakes sound pretty awesome. Think you can help me figure out how to make them? For the next hour, Talia and Connor worked together in the spacious kitchen, creating what could generously be called dinosaur-shaped pancakes. Connor chattered constantly, filling her in on important details, like how Madison didn't like syrup. It's too sticky. How their cat Mr. Whiskers had died last year. Daddy said he went to heaven with Mama. And how he was going to be a dinosaur scientist when he grew up. And a paleontologist, Talia corrected gently, smiling at his enthusiasm. Yeah, that's what I meant. I'm going to find the biggest T-Rex ever and name it after Mama. Madison appeared just as they were flipping the last pancake, her hair messy from sleep and her expression guarded as she took in the scene. Talia made dinosaur pancakes, Connor announced proudly, just like Mama used to. Madison's face clouded instantly. They don't look like Mama's. You're absolutely right, Talia agreed easily, not missing a beat. Mine look more like abstract art dinosaurs. Very modern. Your Mama's were probably much better. Madison blinked, clearly having expected an argument or false reassurance. Yeah, they were. She used blueberries for eyes and made the necks really long for the brontosaurus ones. Can you show me how she did it? I bet Connor would love to learn the real way, too. And just like that, Madison began explaining her mother's technique, how Elena would use bacon strips for spikes and carefully pour the batter to make proper dinosaur shapes. As she talked, her shoulders relaxed, and something that might have been a smile tugged at the corner of her mouth. They were cleaning up the considerable mess when Declan appeared in the doorway, dressed in a dark suit and looking genuinely surprised to find his kitchen full of laughter and the warm smell of breakfast. "Daddy!" Connor launched himself at his father's legs with sticky fingers. "We made dinosaur pancakes. Dahlia said mine looked like a brontosaurus." "I can see that," Declan said carefully, his eyes sweeping over the flour-dusted counter, syrup on the island, and pancake batter in the sink. His jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "You all have been busy. Sorry about the mess," Talia said quickly, reaching for the dish rag. "I was just about to clean up." "It's fine," but his voice suggested it was anything but fine. "Madison, Connor, go get dressed. The bus comes in 30 minutes. "But we just finished eating," Madison protested. "Then you'd better hurry up." After the children reluctantly headed upstairs, Declan poured himself coffee from the pot Talia had made, his movements stiff and controlled. "I should have asked before using the kitchen like this," Talia said, wiping down the counter with more force than necessary. "I didn't think Elena used to make pancakes on weekend mornings," he said quietly, not looking at her. His knuckles were white around his coffee mug. "The kitchen would look exactly like this afterward. Flour everywhere, syrup on everything, the kids covered in batter." Understanding flooded through her like cold water. "I'm sorry. I didn't know." "How could you?" He set his mug down harder than necessary, coffee sloshing. "I should have told you. There are just some things that are difficult to see repeated. Would you prefer I don't cook with them?" Declan was quiet for a long moment, staring into his coffee as if it held answers to questions he was afraid to ask. When he looked up, his eyes were rimmed with exhaustion and something that looked like defeat. "No," he said finally. "No, they need normal. They need this." He gestured vaguely at the lingering evidence of their morning together. "I just need time to adjust to seeing their mother's life being lived by someone else." The honesty in his voice caught Talia off guard. "I understand. Do you?" He looked at her then, really looked, and she saw the question in his eyes, the same one everyone who'd known her before asked without words, the question about why a woman her age was working as a nanny instead of raising children of her own. "Yeah," she said softly, her throat tight. "I do." Something passed between them in that moment, a recognition of shared pain that neither was ready to name. Then Connor's voice from upstairs broke the spell, calling for help finding his favorite dinosaur shirt. "I should go," Declan said, grabbing his briefcase and keys. "My number's on the refrigerator if you need anything. Maria comes Tuesdays and Fridays to clean." The children know their way home from the bus stop. Madison's very responsible. After he left, Talia helped the children get ready for school, learning the intricate negotiations required to get Connor to wear matching socks and Madison to let her fix the tangles from her ponytail. Walking them to the bus stop at the end of the long driveway, she noticed how other parents nodded politely but kept their distance, how conversations quieted when the road's children approached. "And they think we're weird now," Madison said matter-of-factly as they waited for the bright yellow bus. "Why would they think that?" "Because we don't have a mama anymore. And because Daddy doesn't come to things like other parents do." Talia knelt down to Madison's level. "You're not weird. You're brave. There's a big difference." When the bus pulled away with both children aboard, Talia walked back to the empty house, already feeling the weight of the silence that would fill the next several hours. But as she started properly cleaning the kitchen, she found herself humming, something she hadn't done in 3 years. For the first time since arriving, the house felt less like a mausoleum and more like a home that had simply forgotten how to breathe. By the end of her first week, Talia had learned the Rhodes family's unspoken rules. Don't mention Elena during breakfast. Don't ask Declan about his day when he comes home late. Don't rearrange anything in the living room where Elena's reading chair still sat exactly as she'd left it. A bookmark, still marking her place in a novel she'd never finish. It was Friday afternoon when the carefully constructed routine cracked. Talia was helping Connor with a puzzle at the kitchen table when Madison burst through the front door, her backpack hitting the floor with unusual force. Her cheeks were flushed, and tears threatened to spill from her brown eyes. "What happened, sweetheart?" Talia asked, immediately moving toward the 8-year-old. "Nothing," Madison said, but her voice wobbled dangerously. Connor looked up from his puzzle, his small face creased with concern. "Udda Maddie's sad," he announced with the brutal honesty of a 5-year-old. "I'm not sad, I'm angry." Madison exploded, and suddenly the tears she'd been holding back came rushing out. "Mrs. Peterson said we have to make Mother's Day cards for next week. And when I said I don't have a mother anymore, she said I could make one for someone who's like a mother to me." Talia felt her stomach drop. "Ah, Madison, she said I could make it for you," Madison continued, her voice rising. "But you're not my mother. You're just the babysitter. And everyone was looking at me like I'm some sad, broken kid who needs fixing." The words hit Talia like physical blows, not because they were cruel, but because they were true. She wasn't Madison's mother. She was just another temporary person in a long line of people who would eventually leave. "You're right," Talia said quietly, sinking into the chair across from Madison. "I'm not your mother, and I'm sorry Mrs. Peterson put you in that position." Madison looked surprised by the agreement, her anger deflating slightly. "But you know what?" Talia continued. "Being angry about it doesn't make you broken, it makes you human. And missing your mama so much that it hurts to pretend someone else could take her place. That's not sad, that's love." Madison's lower lip trembled. "I don't want to make a stupid card." "Then don't," Talia said simply. But Mrs. Peterson said, "Mrs. Peterson isn't the boss of your feelings. If you don't want to make a Mother's Day card, you don't have to. We can write her a note explaining that some assignments are harder for some kids than others." Connor had abandoned his puzzle and climbed into Talia's lap, sensing the emotional undercurrents, even if he didn't fully understand them. "I miss Mama too," he said softly. "Of course you do," Talia murmured, stroking his blonde hair. "Both of you. That's never going to stop, and it shouldn't." "Daddy doesn't like it when we talk about missing her," Madison said, wiping her nose with the back of her hand. "Your daddy misses her too. Sometimes grown-ups think they need to be strong all the time, even when they're falling apart inside." "Are you falling apart inside?" Connor asked with the directness that only children possessed. Talia's breath caught. "Sometimes," she admitted. "Everyone does sometimes. Even Daddy. Especially Daddy." They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, the afternoon sun streaming through the kitchen windows and highlighting the dust motes dancing in the air. Then Madison spoke again, her voice smaller now. Will you help me write a letter to Mama instead, for Mother's Day? Talia's throat tightened. Of course. And me too, Connor added. I want to tell her about the dinosaur pancakes. So they spent the afternoon at the kitchen table, Madison carefully writing her letter in her neat third-grade handwriting, while Connor dictated his to Talia. They talked about Elena, really talked, sharing memories and stories that had been locked away for too long. Madison told her about how Elena used to let her help plant flowers in the garden every spring, and how she'd make up silly songs about each plant. Connor shared how his mama used to read him stories with different voices for every character, and how she'd tuck him in so tight he felt like a burrito boy. When Declan arrived home that evening, he found them still at the table, Madison showing Connor how to fold their letters into paper airplanes so they could fly to heaven. What's all this? He asked, his voice carefully neutral, but Talia caught the tension in his shoulders. We wrote letters to Mama, Connor announced proudly. Talia said sometimes it's good to talk to people, even when they can't talk back. Declan's eyes found Talia's, and she saw a flash of something that might have been betrayal. I see. Daddy, did you know Mama planted tulips because they reminded her of your first date? Madison asked innocently. Madison, that's enough, Declan said sharply. To go wash up for dinner, but we were just... Now. After the children reluctantly headed upstairs, Declan turned to face Talia fully. His jaw was tight, and his blue eyes had gone cold. I thought we had an understanding about certain topics, he said quietly. They needed to talk about her, Talia replied, standing her ground. Madison had a difficult day at school, and they're both carrying around so much pain. That's not your decision to make. His voice was controlled, but she could hear the anger underneath. You've been here 1 week. 1 week. You don't get to decide what my children need. You're right, Talia said, her own temper flaring. I've been here 1 week. But in that week, I've seen 2 kids who are desperate to remember their mother being told that missing her is too painful for the adults around them to handle. Declan's face went pale. That's not what I'm doing. Isn't it? Talia challenged. When's the last time you said Elena's name in front of them? When's the last time you let them tell you a story about her without changing the subject? You don't understand. I understand plenty, Talia interrupted, her voice rising despite her efforts to stay calm. I understand that you're in pain. I understand that hearing about her hurts. But those children are in pain too, and they're watching their father disappear a little more every day because he can't bear to remember their mother. The silence that followed was deafening. Declan stared at her for a long moment, his chest rising and falling rapidly. Don't, he said finally, his voice barely above a whisper, pretend to know what I'm going through. And don't pretend that avoiding her memory is protecting your children. Talia shot back. Because it's not. It's just teaching them that love is something to be ashamed of. Without another word, Declan turned and walked out of the kitchen, leaving Talia alone with the echoes of their argument and the sudden, terrible certainty that she might have just destroyed the fragile peace they'd been building. Upstairs, she could hear water running and the children's muffled voices, blissfully unaware that the foundation of their carefully constructed world had just developed another crack. The weekend passed in a careful dance of avoidance. Declan left early Saturday morning for what he claimed was a work emergency, returning only after the children were asleep. Sunday brought a similar pattern, polite exchanges about schedules and meals, but nothing more substantial than the weather. Talia found herself walking on eggshells, second-guessing every interaction with Madison and Connor. When Connor asked if they could make pancakes again, she suggested cereal instead. When Madison wanted to show her more pictures of Elena, Talia gently redirected to homework. By Monday morning, the children sensed the shift. Are you mad at Daddy? Connor asked as Talia helped him tie his shoes. No, sweetheart. Why would you think that? Because you both got really quiet. Like when Mrs. Henderson next door stopped talking to Mr. Henderson before he moved away. Madison looked up from her backpack with knowing eyes, far too old for her 8 years. Adults always get quiet before someone leaves. The observation hit Talia like a punch to the chest. "I'm not going anywhere, Madison." That's what the other babysitters said too. After the children left for school, Talia found herself alone in the house with nothing but her thoughts and the weight of silence. She cleaned the already spotless kitchen, organized Connor's toy box, and eventually wandered into the garden Elena had loved so much. The flower beds were overgrown, weeds choking out what had once been carefully planned displays. Talia knelt beside a patch of struggling tulips, the ones Madison had mentioned Elena planted because they reminded her of her first date with Declan. Without thinking, she began pulling weeds, her hands working automatically while her mind churned. She was so absorbed in the work that she didn't hear the car in the driveway. "What are you doing?" Talia looked up to find Declan standing at the edge of the garden, his business suit replaced by jeans and a paint-stained t-shirt. His expression was unreadable. "I'm sorry," she said quickly, brushing dirt from her hands. "I should have asked. I just saw that the flowers were struggling and Elena planted those tulips our second spring in this house," he said quietly, not moving closer. "She said they were like hope. They'd disappear for months and then come back when you least expected them." Talia remained kneeling, unsure whether this was an invitation to conversation or another boundary she'd crossed. "She was right about the hope part," Declan continued, his voice so soft she had to strain to hear it. "They came back every year for 3 years, then last spring, they barely bloomed. This year, I thought they were dead." "They're not dead," Talia said gently. "They just need care." Declan finally moved closer, crouching beside her among the flower beds. His hands were shaking slightly as he reached for a weed near the base of a struggling tulip. "I used to help her with this," he admitted. "Every weekend we'd come out here together. She'd tell me about her plans for the garden, and I'd pretend I understood the difference between annuals and perennials." "What changed?" "She got sick." The words came out rough, like they'd been scraping against his throat for months. "The last year, she was too weak to garden. I was too busy taking care of her to think about flowers. After she died, I couldn't bear to touch anything she'd loved." They worked in silence for several minutes, their hands occasionally brushing as they cleared away the debris of neglect. The afternoon sun was warm on their backs, and somewhere in the distance, a mockingbird was cycling through its repertoire of stolen songs. "I hired you because you came with the best references," Declan said suddenly. 3 families said you were the most caring, intuitive childcare provider they'd ever employed. They said you understood children in a way that seemed almost instinctive. Talia's hands stilled in the dirt. And then they'd get this look when they talked about you. This sadness, like they wanted to say more but couldn't. She'd known this conversation would come eventually. It always did. "I had a son," she said simply, not looking at him. His name was Marcus. He would have been 6 next month." The silence stretched between them like a bridge neither was sure they should cross. "What happened?" Declan asked gently. "Stillborn." The word still felt like swallowing glass. "Full term. Everything perfect according to the doctors. And then just nothing. No heartbeat. No cry. No reason." Declan's hand found hers in the dirt, his fingers warm and steady. "Talia, his father, my fiancé, he couldn't handle it. The grief, the what-ifs, the way I'd wake up some mornings and forget for just a moment that Marcus wasn't coming home from the hospital. David said I was stuck in the past, that I needed to move on. So he did, moved on without me. I'm sorry." The words were inadequate, but his voice carried the weight of someone who truly understood loss. "That's why I understand Madison and Connor," she continued. "That's why I pushed you to let them talk about Elena, because I know what it's like to have people tell you that love is something you should get over, instead of something you learn to carry." They sat together among Elena's struggling tulips, 2 broken people who'd found each other in the wreckage of their separate tragedies. "I've been so afraid," Declan admitted finally. "Afraid that if I let them remember her too much, they'll never move forward. But also afraid that if I don't keep her memory alive, they'll forget her altogether." "They won't forget her," Talia assured him. But they need permission to remember her with joy, not just sadness. I don't know how to do that. Maybe we figure it out together. When the children returned from school that afternoon, they found Talia and their father kneeling side by side in their mother's garden, carefully tending the flowers that had been waiting all winter to bloom again. "Are you fixing Mama's tulips?" Madison asked, dropping her backpack and running toward them. "We're helping them remember how to grow," Declan said, and for the first time in months, his voice didn't break when he talked about something Elena had loved. Connor plopped down in the dirt between them, immediately getting his school clothes dirty. "Can I help? Mama always said I was good at making things grow." "She was right," Declan said, handing his son a small gardening tool. "You are." As the four of them worked together in the fading afternoon light, something shifted in the air around them. It wasn't healing. That would take much longer. But it was the beginning of something that might eventually bloom into hope. 3 weeks after the garden conversation, life at the Rhodes house had settled into a new rhythm. Declan came home earlier most evenings, often joining them for dinner and staying to help with homework. The children had begun sharing memories of Elena more freely, and Talia had learned to navigate the delicate balance between honoring their mother's memory and building their own new traditions. It was on a crisp Thursday morning in late April when everything changed again. Talia was in the kitchen preparing snacks for the children's after-school return when the doorbell rang. Through the front window, she could see a sleek black sedan in the driveway, expensive, imposing, and somehow ominous. The woman standing on the porch was elegantly dressed in a cream-colored suit, her silver hair perfectly styled, her posture radiating the kind of authority that came from decades of getting exactly what she wanted. Her eyes, a pale blue that reminded Talia uncomfortably of winter storms, swept over her with obvious disapproval. "Well, you must be the new Nanny," the woman said without preamble, her voice carrying a slight accent that spoke of old Charleston money. "I'm Victoria Whitmore, Elena's mother." Talia's stomach dropped. Declan had mentioned Elena's parents in passing, wealthy, traditional, and still struggling with their daughter's death, but she'd gotten the impression they weren't particularly involved in the children's lives. "Mrs. Whitmore," Talia said, stepping aside to let her in. "And I'm Talia Brooks. Please, come in." Victoria's eyes swept over the foyer, taking in the fresh flowers Talia had placed on the entrance table, and the children's artwork now displayed on the refrigerator. Small changes that had brought life back to the house. "Where are my grandchildren?" Victoria asked, her tone suggesting Talia might have misplaced them. "They're at school. They'll be home around 3:30. "And Declan?" "At work. He should be home by 6. Victoria nodded crisply and settled herself in the living room as if she owned it, which, Talia reflected uncomfortably, she very well might feel she did. Her eyes lingered on Elena's reading chair, which still held the bookmark in her unfinished novel. "I suppose he told you about our disagreement," Victoria said, her voice carefully modulated. "I'm sorry, but no. He didn't mention any disagreement." Victoria's eyebrows rose slightly. "How interesting. Well, I'm sure you'll hear about it soon enough." She paused, studying Talia with the intensity of a scientist examining a specimen. "Tell me, Miss Brooks, what exactly are your intentions here?" "I'm sorry." "Your intentions? With my son-in-law? With my grandchildren? I've been watching this house for weeks, and I've noticed some rather significant changes." Talia felt heat rise in her cheeks. "I'm not sure what you mean." "The garden, for instance. Elena's garden, which has been left untouched since her death, is suddenly being maintained. The children are walking differently, less carefully, more freely. And Declan's car has been in the driveway before dark more often than not." The observation was so clinical, so invasive, that Talia had to fight to keep her voice steady. "I care about this family. I want them to be happy." "How noble." Victoria's tone suggested she found nothing noble about it at all. "And I suppose it has nothing to do with the fact that my son-in-law is a very wealthy, very vulnerable widower." The accusation hit Talia like a slap. "Mrs. Whitmore, I think there's been a misunderstanding." "Has there?" Victoria leaned forward slightly. You see, Miss Brooks, I loved my daughter very much. Elena was special, irreplaceable, and I won't stand by and watch some opportunistic woman move into her home, sleep in her house, and play mother to her children while my son-in-law is too grief-stricken to see what's happening. I would never, wouldn't you? Victoria stood, her posture regal and intimidating. But you've been here less than a month, and already you're making changes, inserting yourself into family traditions, encouraging my grandchildren to move on from their mother. That's not what I'm doing, isn't it? Tell me, Miss Brooks, do you have children of your own? The question landed like a physical blow. Tahlia's breath caught, and she felt the familiar tightness in her chest that always accompanied thoughts of Marcus. Victoria noticed the reaction immediately, her eyes sharpening like a predator, sensing weakness. Ah, I see. How convenient for you, then, to find a ready-made family to satisfy whatever maternal instincts you've been harboring. You don't know anything about me, Tahlia said quietly, but her voice shook. I know enough. I know that women like you see men like Declan as a solution to their problems. I know that my grandchildren are vulnerable right now, desperate for maternal affection, and easily manipulated by someone who knows how to exploit that need. The front door opened, and Connor's voice carried through the house. Tahlia, we're home! Victoria's expression shifted immediately, her stern features softening into what might have passed for grandmotherly warmth to someone who didn't know better. Grandmother Victoria! Madison's voice held surprise and uncertainty as she appeared in the living room doorway, Connor close behind. Hello, darlings, Victoria said, opening her arms. Come give your grandmother a hug. The children approached cautiously. They'd seen their maternal grandmother only a handful of times since Eleanor's death, and Tahlia could see the confusion in their eyes. Adu, what are you doing here? Connor asked with his typical 5-year-old directness. I came to see you, of course, and to have a little chat with your father about some important family matters. Madison looked between her grandmother and Tahlia, clearly sensing the tension in the room. Is everything okay? Everything's fine, sweetheart, Tahlia said quickly. Why don't you and Connor get started on your homework? I'll bring you snacks in a few minutes. Actually, Victoria interjected smoothly, I was hoping to spend some time with the children. Alone. We have so much catching up to do. It wasn't a request, and they all knew it. Of course, Tahlia said, though every instinct screamed against leaving the children alone with someone who radiated such cold calculation. I'll be in the kitchen if you need anything. As she retreated, she heard Victoria's voice take on a honey-sweet tone that somehow sounded more menacing than her earlier hostility. Now then, children, tell grandmother all about your new babysitter. Has she been taking good care of you? Tahlia busied herself in the kitchen, but she couldn't shake the feeling that Victoria Whitmore's arrival was more than just a surprise visit. There was something predatory in the woman's manner, something that suggested she'd come with a specific agenda. When Declan's car pulled into the driveway an hour earlier than usual, Tahlia felt a mixture of relief and dread. Whatever storm was brewing, it was about to break, and she had the sinking feeling that she was about to find herself at the center of it. Through the kitchen window, she watched Declan's face change as he recognized the black sedan. His shoulders squared, his jaw tightened, and something that looked like resignation settled over his features. The war for this family's future was about to begin, and Tahlia wasn't sure she was equipped to fight it. The confrontation began the moment Declan walked through the front door. Victoria. His voice was carefully controlled, but Tahlia could hear the steel underneath. I wasn't expecting you. Clearly. Victoria rose from the living room sofa with practiced grace, her posture radiating disapproval. We need to talk, Declan, privately. Madison and Connor looked between the adults with the anxious expressions of children who'd learned to read the warning signs of adult storms. Tahlia stepped forward instinctively. Kids, why don't you go upstairs and wash up for dinner? She suggested gently. But Grandmother Victoria just got here, Connor protested, and I'll still be here when you come back down, darling. Victoria said smoothly. "Run along now." After the children reluctantly headed upstairs, the three adults stood in tense silence. Declan loosened his tie, a gesture Talia had learned meant he was preparing for battle. "What do you want, Victoria?" he asked finally. "And I want to discuss the welfare of my grandchildren." Victoria's gaze flicked meaningfully toward Talia. "Perhaps we should speak alone." "Talia stays," Declan said firmly. "She's part of this family." The word sent a jolt through Talia's chest, but Victoria's expression hardened. "Is she? How convenient, considering she's been here all of 5 minutes." Victoria moved closer to Declan, her voice dropping to the tone of someone delivering a carefully rehearsed speech. "Declan, dear, I understand you're lonely. Elena's been gone 18 months, and you're still a young man with needs, but bringing some stranger into my daughter's home, around my grandchildren—" "Stop!" Declan's voice cut through her words like a blade. "And stop right there. I won't stop. Someone needs to speak for Elena since she can't speak for herself." Victoria's composure cracked slightly, revealing the grief and fury underneath. "Do you think she'd want this? Some woman sleeping under her roof, playing house with her children, erasing her memory?" "No one is erasing Elena's memory," Declan said, his voice rising. "If you'd bothered to visit more than twice since the funeral, you'd know that. I've been giving you space to grieve properly," Victoria shot back. "But clearly, you've used that space to move on rather quickly." Talia felt sick. "Mrs. Whitmore, there's nothing inappropriate happening here. I'm employed as—" "You're employed to care for the children," Victoria interrupted, "not to seduce their father or replace their mother." "That's enough." Declan stepped between them, his face flushed with anger. "You don't get to come into my house and attack Talia. You don't get to question my decisions about my children." "Your children." Victoria's voice went dangerously quiet. "Those children are all I have left of my daughter, Declan. My only daughter, who died because you couldn't afford the best treatment." The slap of Declan's hand hitting the wall made them all jump. "Don't." His voice was barely controlled. "Don't you dare blame me for something we both know was nobody's fault." "Isn't it? You're the one who insisted on that experimental treatment instead of the proven therapies. You're the one who wanted to keep fighting when the doctors said—" "The doctors said there was hope." Declan's composure finally shattered. "Elena wanted to try everything. She wanted to live, Victoria, and I supported that choice because I loved her. And look where it got her." Victoria's words hung in the air like poison. Dead at 32, leaving behind 2 babies who will never remember her properly. The silence that followed was deafening. Talia could hear her own heartbeat, could feel the weight of old wounds being torn open in front of her. "Get out," Declan said quietly. "Declan, get out of my house." His voice was steady now, but Talia could see his hands shaking. "You want to blame me for Elena's death? Fine. We both know you've been doing that since the day she died. But you don't get to come here and poison my children with that guilt." Victoria straightened her jacket, her mask of control sliding back into place. "This isn't over. Those children deserve better than this situation. Elena's will established a trust fund for their education and welfare, and as the trustee, you're not taking my children away from me. I'm not taking them anywhere. But I won't stand by and watch you destroy what Elena built for them." Victoria's gaze swept over Talia one last time. "Ask yourself, Miss Brooks, is whatever you think you're building here worth tearing apart what's left of this family?" With that, she walked toward the front door, pausing only to call upstairs. "Goodbye, darlings. Grandmother will see you very soon." The front door closed with a quiet click that somehow sounded more ominous than a slam. Declan stood frozen in the middle of the living room, his chest rising and falling rapidly. Talia approached him carefully, the way she might approach a wounded animal. "Declan?" "She's not wrong," he said suddenly, his voice hollow. "About the treatment, the experimental therapy. The doctors said the odds were slim, but Elena wanted to try. And I encouraged her. I thought if we just fought hard enough, if we just didn't give up, you couldn't have known. I could have pushed her toward the palliative care earlier. given her more time with the kids instead of more time in hospitals. He sank into Elena's reading chair, looking more broken than Talia had ever seen him. Victoria's been saying it for 18 months, and maybe she's right. Maybe I killed my wife with hope. Talia knelt beside the chair, her heart breaking for this man who'd been carrying such impossible guilt. Elena made her own choices. She fought because she wanted to live, not because you forced her to. Did she? Or did I make it impossible for her to choose anything else? Before Talia could answer, Madison appeared at the bottom of the stairs, her eyes wide and frightened. Daddy, why was Grandmother Victoria upset? Are you okay? Declan looked up at his daughter and seemed to physically pull himself together. I'm fine, sweetheart. Grandmother Victoria just had some things she needed to say. She seemed mad at Talia, Connor added, appearing beside his sister. Sometimes adults disagree about things, Talia said carefully. It doesn't mean anyone did anything wrong. But as she looked at Declan's haunted expression and thought about Victoria's parting threat, she wondered if that was really true. Maybe Victoria was right. Maybe her presence here was causing more harm than good. Maybe some families were too broken to be fixed, and some wounds too deep to heal. That night, after the children were asleep and Declan had retreated to his office with another glass of whiskey, Talia sat in her room, staring at the small blue baby shoe in her nightstand drawer. For the first time since arriving at the Rhodes house, she seriously considered packing her bags and leaving, because Victoria Whitmore had planted a seed of doubt that was growing into something poisonous. What if she wasn't helping this family heal? What if she was just another way for them to avoid dealing with their grief? What if she was doing exactly what David had accused her of 3 years ago, getting stuck in the past instead of learning to let go? The call came at 2:17 a.m. on a Tuesday night, shrill and insistent in the darkness of Talia's room. She fumbled for her phone, heart racing with the kind of panic that always accompanied middle-of-the-night calls. Talia. Declan's voice was tight with barely controlled fear. I'm at Charleston General. Connor's in the emergency room. She was out of bed before he finished the sentence. What happened? Is he okay? Appendicitis. They're taking him into surgery now. Madison is here with me, but she's scared, and I thought maybe I'm on my way. Talia threw on clothes and drove through the empty Charleston streets, her hands gripping the steering wheel as memories threatened to overwhelm her. Hospital corridors, beeping machines, the terrible quiet of waiting rooms where families gathered to receive news that would change everything. She found them in the pediatric waiting area, Declan pacing like a caged animal, while Madison curled in an oversized chair, clutching a stuffed elephant that had seen better days. The little girl's face was streaked with tears, and she looked impossibly small in the harsh fluorescent lighting. Talia! Madison launched herself into Talia's arms, her small body shaking with suppressed sobs. Connor was screaming, and there was so much blood, and the ambulance came and— Shh, sweetheart, he's going to be okay, Talia murmured, stroking Madison's hair while her eyes found Declan's over the child's head. He looked haggard, his hair disheveled, and his shirt wrinkled from being pulled on hastily. They said it was routine, he said, but his voice carried the weight of someone who'd learned that nothing in hospitals was ever truly routine. Laparoscopic surgery. He should be fine, but seeing him in that much pain— Talia guided Madison back to the chair and settled beside her, pulling the 8-year-old close. Tell me what happened. He woke up crying, Madison said in a small voice. His tummy hurt really bad, and when Daddy touched it, Connor screamed, like really screamed. I thought he was going to die. But he's not going to die, Talia said firmly. The doctors here are very good at fixing appendixes. It's like taking out a tiny part that doesn't work anymore so the rest of him can feel better. Declan sat down heavily across from them, burying his face in his hands. Elena always handled the medical stuff, he said quietly. She'd know what questions to ask, what to watch for. I froze when he started screaming. All I could think about was losing him too. The admission hung in the air between them, raw and honest. Talia reached across the space and touched his arm. You didn't freeze. You got him to the hospital. You did exactly what any parent would do. Elena would have done it better. Elena isn't here, Talia said gently. But you are, and Madison is. And Connor is going to be fine because you acted fast. They settled into the particular rhythm of hospital waiting, Madison dozing fitfully against Talia's shoulder, while Declan alternated between pacing and staring at the doors that separated them from their boy. Talia found herself studying the other families scattered around the waiting room, each carrying their own burden of worry and hope. At 4:30 a.m., Dr. Patel emerged in scrubs, her kind face bearing the tired satisfaction of a successful surgery. "Mr. Rhodes, Connor did beautifully. The appendix was definitely inflamed, but we caught it before it ruptured. He'll need to stay overnight for observation, but he should be able to go home tomorrow afternoon." The relief that washed over Declan's face was almost painful to witness. Madison stirred in Talia's arms, blinking sleepily. "Is Connor okay?" she whispered. "He's perfect," Dr. Patel assured her. "Would you like to see him? He's still sleeping, but he should wake up in an hour or so." Connor looked impossibly small in the hospital bed, dwarfed by machines and monitors, but his color was good, and his breathing was steady. Madison approached the bed carefully, as if her brother might break. "He looks like he's having good dreams," she said softly. "I hope so," Declan murmured, reaching out to brush Connor's blonde hair back from his forehead. They took turns sitting with Connor as he drifted in and out of sleep, his small hand occasionally reaching for whoever was closest. Around noon, he finally woke up fully, groggy but alert enough to complain about being hungry. "The good news," Dr. Patel said during her afternoon rounds, "is that children bounce back from appendectomies remarkably quickly. He should be running around normally within a week or two." As they prepared to take Connor home that evening, Talia noticed Declan's hands shaking as he signed the discharge papers. The crisis was over, but the aftershocks were just beginning. "Thank you," he said quietly, as they waited for the wheelchair that would take Connor to the car. "For coming, for being there with Madison. I don't know what I would have done." "You would have figured it out," Talia interrupted. "You're a good father, Declan. Stop doubting that." But even as she said it, she could see the doubt in his eyes, the fear that had been planted there long before Victoria Whitmore's visit, the fear that he wasn't enough, that he couldn't protect the people he loved, that loss was always waiting around the corner. Connor fell asleep in the car on the way home, his head lolling against the window. Madison held his hand from her booster seat, unwilling to let go of her little brother now that she had him back. "Talia!" Madison's voice was small in the darkened car. "Yeah, sweetheart. When Mama was in the hospital, did it feel like this? Like everything was scary and you couldn't breathe right?" Talia met Declan's eyes in the rearview mirror, seeing her own pain reflected there. "Yeah," she said softly. "It felt exactly like this. But Mama didn't come home." "No," Declan said, his voice rough. "She didn't. But Connor did." "Connor did." Madison was quiet for a moment, processing this in the way children do, simply, directly, without the complicated layers adults add to everything. "And I'm glad Connor came home," she said finally. "And I'm glad you were there with us, Talia. It felt less scary with you there." As they pulled into the driveway of the big house that had become home, Talia realized something had shifted during those long hours in the hospital. The crisis had stripped away pretense and left them with something raw and real. Not a perfect family, but a family nonetheless. But she also realized that Victoria Whitmore was right about one thing. They were fragile, all of them. And the question that had been haunting her since Victoria's visit pressed against her chest with renewed urgency. Was she making them stronger? Or was she just another potential loss they couldn't afford? Connor's recovery was swift, just as Dr. Patel had predicted. Within a week, he was back to his energetic self, proudly showing off his small bandages to anyone who would listen and declaring that he was now part robot because of the tiny surgical clips inside him. It was during this period of relative calm that Declan found the courage to do something he'd been avoiding for 18 months. "I want to show you something," he said to Talia one evening after the children were asleep. His voice carried a nervous energy she'd never heard before. He led her upstairs to a door at the end of the hallway that she'd assumed was a linen closet. Instead, when he opened it, she found herself looking at a staircase leading to what must have been an attic space. "Elena's studio," he said simply. The room that greeted them was like stepping into sunlight. Large windows on 3 sides flooded the space with the golden light of early evening, and canvases lined every available wall. Elena Rhodes had been an artist, a talented one, judging by the paintings that surrounded them. "She was working on a children's book," Declan said, his voice soft with memory, "about a little girl who could paint doors to anywhere she wanted to go. She said it was for Madison and Connor, something they could keep forever." Talia moved through the studio slowly, taking in the explosion of color and creativity. There were landscapes of Charleston's famous gardens, portraits of the children at various ages, and abstract pieces that seemed to capture pure emotion on canvas. "Ah, these are incredible," she breathed, stopping in front of a painting of Connor as a toddler, his chubby hands covered in what appeared to be finger paint, while he grinned at the viewer with pure joy. She painted every day, even when she was sick. Declan picked up a sketchbook from a paint-splattered table. The doctors said creative expression might help with the stress of treatment. "I used to come up here and watch her work, and for those few hours we could pretend everything was normal." Talia understood why he'd avoided this room. It was Elena's essence distilled into physical form, her dreams, her love for her family, her hope for the future she'd never see. "The children don't know about this room," Declan continued. I didn't know how to show them. What if it made them sadder? What if they felt like they had to preserve it exactly as she left it? What if it gave them comfort?" Talia asked gently. "What if seeing how much their mother loved them, how she saw them through her eyes, helped them remember her joy instead of just her illness?" Declan was quiet for a long moment, his fingers tracing the edge of an unfinished canvas. "There's something else," he said finally. "Something I haven't told anyone." He pulled out a folder from beneath a stack of paintings and handed it to Talia with trembling hands. Inside were medical records, insurance papers, and financial documents. "Victoria was right about one thing," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "We couldn't afford the experimental treatment. Our insurance wouldn't cover it. So I mortgaged the house, took out loans, maxed out credit cards. I was so desperate to save her that I risked everything." Talia looked up from the papers, seeing the shame and guilt written across his features. "The treatments didn't work, and Elena died anyway. But the debt, it's still here. I've been working 18-hour days trying to keep up with payments and keep the house. That's why I'm never home. That's why I can barely afford to pay you what you deserve." "Declan, Victoria knows. She's known all along. That's why she's so confident she can take the children if she wants to, because technically I'm failing to provide them with the stable financial environment Elena's trust requires." The weight of his confession settled between them. Talia understood now why Victoria had been so confident in her threats, why Declan carried himself like a man drowning in more than just grief. "Why are you telling me this?" Talia asked. "Because you deserve to know what you're walking into. Because He stopped, running a hand through his hair, in the gesture she'd come to recognize as his tell when emotions threatened to overwhelm him. "Because I'm falling in love with you. And that terrifies me more than losing the house." The words hung in the air between them like a bridge neither was sure they should cross. "I'm falling in love with you," he repeated, his voice stronger now. And I know that's not fair. I know you didn't sign up to fall for a widowed father who's drowning in debt and guilt. I know I have no right to ask you to choose this chaos." "Declan, stop!" Talia moved closer, her heart pounding. "Stop telling me what I did or didn't sign up for. But you need to understand. I understand that you're scared. I understand that loving someone again feels like betraying Elena's memory. I understand that you think you're not enough, that you can't protect the people you love. She reached up and cupped his face in her hands. But you're wrong about something. What? You're wrong if you think I'm here because it's easy. I'm not looking for easy, Declan. I'm looking for real. And this, she gestured around the studio, at Elena's paintings, at the evidence of a love so deep it had left art behind as proof. This is real. Even knowing about the debt, about Victoria's threats, especially knowing about those things. Talia took a deep breath, feeling like she was about to jump off a cliff. Because I'm falling in love with you too, and I'm falling in love with Madison and Connor. And I know what it's like to lose everything that matters, so I'm not going to walk away from something that could matter because it might be complicated. Declan stared at her for a long moment, as if he couldn't quite believe what he was hearing. Then he kissed her, soft and desperate and full of all the words they hadn't said yet. When they broke apart, Talia rested her forehead against his, breathing in the smell of paint and possibility. "So what do we do now?" she asked. "I don't know," he admitted. "I've been so focused on just surviving each day that I forgot to think about building something new." "Then maybe it's time to start thinking about it," Talia said. Together, outside, the Charleston evening settled around them like a benediction, and for the first time since Elena's death, the future felt like something worth fighting for. But even as they stood there, planning and hoping, neither of them noticed the black sedan parked across the street, or the figure inside it making careful notes about the lights in the upstairs window and how long they stayed on. The papers arrived on a grey Monday morning in early June, delivered by a courier who seemed apologetic about the official nature of his visit. Talia signed for the envelope with a sense of foreboding that proved all too accurate when Declan opened it that evening. "Petition for emergency custody modification," he read aloud, his voice hollow. "Victoria is claiming I'm an unfit guardian due to financial instability and inappropriate living arrangements." They were sitting in his office after dinner, the children safely upstairs doing homework. The envelope's contents were spread across his desk like evidence of a crime: legal documents, financial statements, and what appeared to be photographs taken with a telephoto lens. "She's been watching us," Talia said, picking up one of the photos. It showed her and Declan in Elena's studio the week before, standing close together near the windows. From the angle, it would be easy to misinterpret their conversation as something intimate. "There's more." Declan's voice was tight as he read through the documents. "She's claiming that I've been neglecting the children's emotional needs by allowing an unqualified romantic interest to serve as their primary caregiver." Talia felt sick. "What does this mean legally?" "It means we have a hearing in 2 weeks. It means I need to prove that the children are better off with me than with their grandmother." He set the papers down with shaking hands. "And it means Victoria is playing for keeps." The next morning brought another unwelcome surprise. Talia was walking the children to the bus stop when a sleek car pulled up beside them. Victoria Whitmore emerged, dressed in what could only be described as battle armor, a sharp navy suit and an expression of grim determination. "Madison, Connor," she said warmly, as if she hadn't just filed legal papers to take them away from their father. "Oh, how wonderful to see you." "Grandmother Victoria," Madison said cautiously. Connor moved closer to Talia, instinctively seeking protection. "I was hoping we could have a little chat," Victoria continued, her smile not reaching her eyes. "Just the 3 of us." "The children need to catch their bus," Talia said firmly. "The children can miss 1 day of school." Victoria's tone brooked no argument. "This is family business, Miss Brooks. I'm sure you understand." Madison looked between the adults, her 8-year-old instincts clearly screaming that something was wrong. "I don't want to miss school. We have a math test today." "Tests can be made up, darling. Family is more important." "Then why haven't you visited us more?" The question came from Connor, delivered with the devastating honesty only a 5-year-old could manage. Victoria's composure flickered for just a moment. "Because I've been very busy making sure you and your sister have everything you need for your future." "We already have everything we need," Madison said, moving protectively in front of her brother. "We have Daddy and Talia, and our house, and our friends." "But what if Daddy can't take care of you anymore?" Victoria asked gently, crouching down to Madison's level. "What if something happened and you needed someone else to make sure you were safe?" "Like what?" Connor asked, his voice small. Talia stepped forward. "Mrs. Whitmore, this isn't appropriate." "What's not appropriate," Victoria said, rising to face her, "is filling these children's heads with fantasies about happy endings. What's not appropriate is letting them believe that playing house with the help is the same as having a real family." "We are a real family," Madison said fiercely. "Talia loves us, and we love her, and Daddy loves her too." "Oh, sweetheart." Victoria's voice was honey-sweet and poisonous. "Adults say they love people all the time, but real love means staying forever, even when things get hard. Ask Miss Brooks if she's planning to stay forever." The question hit Talia like a physical blow. She looked down at two pairs of eyes, Madison's brown ones, so like her mother's, Connor's blue ones reflecting his father's pain, and felt the weight of a promise she wasn't sure she could make. She began. "You see," Victoria said softly to the children, "she can't promise, because she doesn't really belong here, but I'm your grandmother. I'm your mother's mother. I'll never leave you, no matter what." The school bus appeared at the end of the street, its familiar yellow bulk a welcome interruption to the emotional ambush taking place on the sidewalk. "Come on," Talia said to the children, her voice steadier than she felt. "You don't want to miss your math test." As they walked toward the bus, she could feel Victoria's eyes boring into her back, but it was Madison's small hand slipping into hers that nearly broke her resolve. "Talia," Madison whispered as they reached the bus, "you're not going to leave us, are you?" Talia looked into the little girl's face and saw Elena's eyes, Declan's stubborn chin, and a vulnerability that made her chest ache. "I'm not planning to go anywhere, sweetheart, but you're not promising either." The observation was delivered without accusation, just the matter-of-fact wisdom of a child who'd learned too early that adults' plans didn't always work out. After the bus pulled away, Talia walked back to the house in silence, Victoria's question echoing in her mind. Was she planning to stay forever? Could she make that promise to children who'd already lost so much? She found Declan in the kitchen, staring at his laptop screen with the hollow expression of a man watching his world crumble. "The hearing's been moved up," he said without looking at her. "Thursday, Victoria's attorney is claiming emergency circumstances, something about new evidence of the children being exposed to inappropriate influences." "What kind of evidence?" He turned the laptop toward her, and Talia felt her blood run cold. On the screen was a web page that looked official, a background check website showing her name, her photo, and a list of previous addresses. But there was something else, something that made her stomach drop. Employment history. Previous position terminated due to boundary violations with employer family. Personal references declined to provide recommendations. It was lies, all of it. But it looked real, looked official, looked damning. "Victoria did this," Talia said, her voice barely above a whisper. "It doesn't matter if she did. It's out there now. And in a custody hearing, even false accusations can be enough to plant doubt." Talia sank into the chair across from him, feeling the walls closing in. "I should leave." "What?" "I should leave before the hearing. Remove myself from the equation so she can't use me against you." Declan reached across the table and grabbed her hands. "No, absolutely not. Declan, be realistic. If I'm here, she'll make me the issue. She'll say you're choosing your girlfriend over your children's welfare. But if I'm gone, if you're gone, the children lose someone they love. Again." His grip tightened. "I won't let that happen. And if you lose them because of me?" The question hung between them like a sword suspended by a thread, because they both knew the answer. They both knew that sometimes love meant making impossible choices, and sometimes the person you loved most was the one you had to let go. Outside, storm clouds were gathering over Charleston, and in the distance, thunder rumbled like a warning of the battles yet to come. The courtroom was smaller than Talia had expected, its wood-paneled walls and fluorescent lighting giving it the atmosphere of a corporate conference room rather than a place where families were torn apart and rebuilt. She sat in the back row, having been asked by Declan's attorney to remain as inconspicuous as possible. Victoria Whitmore commanded the front of the room like a general preparing for battle. Her legal team arranged around her with military precision. She dressed for the role of grieving grandmother perfectly, a black dress that spoke of continued mourning, pearl earrings that whispered of old Charleston money, and an expression of righteous concern that would have been convincing if Talia hadn't seen the calculation behind it. Judge Miranda Chen presided with the weary professionalism of someone who'd seen too many family tragedies play out in her courtroom. She listened as Victoria's attorney painted a picture of Declan as a man drowning in debt and poor judgment, a father so blinded by loneliness that he'd endangered his children's welfare. "Your Honor," the attorney continued, "Mr. Rhodes has placed his romantic interests above his children's stability. The defendant has allowed an unqualified individual with questionable references to serve as the primary caregiver, while he works excessive hours to pay debts incurred against medical advice." Talia felt each word like a physical blow, especially because some of them contained grains of truth twisted into weapons. Then it was Declan's turn. He stood slowly, his hands trembling slightly as he approached the witness stand. But when he began to speak, his voice was steady and strong. "Your Honor, I won't pretend I'm a perfect father. I won't pretend that losing Elena didn't break something in me that I'm still trying to fix. But my children are not suffering because of my choices. They're healing because of them." He talked about the changes in Madison and Connor since Talia's arrival, how they'd begun to laugh again, to talk about their mother with joy instead of just sadness, to believe that love didn't always end in loss. "Talia Brooks didn't just become our nanny," he said, his eyes finding hers across the courtroom. "She became the person who taught my children that it's okay to be sad and okay to be happy, sometimes in the same day. She taught them that remembering their mother isn't betraying her memory, it's honoring it." Victoria's attorney objected to the emotional testimony, but Judge Chen allowed it to continue. "The debt Mrs. Whitmore mentions, yes, it exists. I mortgaged everything to try to save my wife's life. Some people might call that poor financial planning. I call it love, and I'm working every day to rebuild what we lost, not just financially, but emotionally." Then came the surprise that no one had expected. Madison Rhodes walked into the courtroom. She was supposed to be at school, supposed to be safely removed from the adult complications that threatened to tear her world apart. Instead, she stood in the doorway in her school uniform, her backpack still on her shoulders, looking like a small but fierce warrior. "And Madison," the judge said gently, "you shouldn't be here, sweetheart." "Yes, I should," Madison said, walking purposefully toward the front of the room, "because everyone's talking about what's best for me and Connor, but nobody's asking us what we want." Victoria half rose from her chair. "Madison, darling, this isn't appropriate. You want to know what's not appropriate." Madison turned to face her grandmother, and Talia was struck by how much she looked like Elena in that moment. Fierce, protective, unafraid. "What's not appropriate is trying to take us away from our dad and Talia because you're still sad about Mama." "Madison," Judge Chen said carefully, "can you tell me how you got here?" "Connor and I walked. We left school during lunch. Mrs. Peterson is probably really mad, but we had to come tell everyone the truth." "And what's the truth?" Madison looked around the courtroom, at her father, at Victoria, at Talia sitting in the back row, and took a deep breath. "The truth is that Daddy cries sometimes, and that's okay because we all cry sometimes. The truth is that we're not rich anymore, but we have enough. The truth is that Talia isn't trying to replace our mama. She's helping us remember how to be happy again." Connor appeared in the doorway then, having apparently followed his sister's lead. He ran straight to Declan, launching himself into his father's arms. "Daddy, we don't want to live with Grandmother Victoria," he announced with 5-year-old directness. We want to stay with you and Talia." Judge Chen looked at the chaos erupting in her courtroom, at two children who'd essentially testified with their feet, at a grandmother whose certainty was beginning to crack, at a father holding his son like a lifeline. "Mrs. Whitmore," she said finally, "I understand your concerns about these children's welfare, but looking at them now, seeing them advocate so clearly for their current living situation, I have to question whether disrupting their stability serves their best interests." Victoria's composure finally cracked. "They don't understand what they're asking for," she said, her voice breaking. "They don't understand that people leave, that promises get broken, that love isn't always enough." "You're right," Talia said, standing up from the back row. Everyone turned to look at her as she walked forward. "Love isn't always enough, but it's a good place to start." She knelt down in front of Madison and Connor, looking into their faces with the kind of honesty she'd learned from them. "I can't promise I'll never leave," she said quietly. "I can't promise I'll never make mistakes, or that bad things will never happen. But I can promise that if I stay, it will be because I choose to stay every single day. And I can promise that no matter what happens, you'll always be loved." "Are you staying?" Connor asked, his small hand finding hers. Talia looked up at Declan, at the hope and fear warring in his expression, and made the only choice that mattered. "I'm staying." 6 months later, the garden behind the Rhodes house bloomed with new life. Elena's tulips had come back stronger than ever, joined by new plantings that spoke of hope for the future rather than grief for the past. Talia knelt in the dirt, helping Connor plant marigolds, while Madison carefully transplanted seedlings they'd started from seeds found in Elena's studio. Declan was building raised beds for vegetables, the afternoon sun catching the gold in his hair as he worked. Victoria visited every other weekend now, having grudgingly accepted that her grandchildren were thriving. The relationship was still strained, but they were learning to coexist for the children's sake. "Talia," Madison said suddenly, looking up from her seedlings, "do you think Mama would like what we're doing to her garden?" "I think," Talia said, brushing dirt from Madison's cheek, "that your Mama would love seeing you happy. That's what gardens are for, growing new things while honoring what came before." Connor held up a marigold, its orange petals bright against the black soil. "I'm going to plant this one right here, so Mama can see it from heaven." As the sun set over Charleston, painting the sky in shades of hope and healing, the Rhodes family worked together in the garden, where love had taught them that sometimes the most beautiful flowers grow in ground that's been broken. Sometimes the heart doesn't need fixing, just someone who stays when it's still learning how to bloom. After following Talia and Declan's journey, one question lingers. If you were in Talia's place, would you have had the courage to stay and fight for a family that wasn't originally yours, even knowing you could lose everything? Or do you believe that true love is always worth the risk, regardless of past scars? The story shows us that sometimes the most beautiful families are the ones we choose to build, with the broken pieces that remain. Talia didn't just become part of the Rhodes' life, she became the bridge that reconnected them to each other and to Elena's memory. What would you do if you had to choose between protecting your heart or risking everything for a second chance at love? Your participation on the channel is very important. Please leave your opinion in the comments. Thank you so much for watching until the end. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, leave a like, and comment your thoughts. Your participation is very important to us. See you next time.